You want clip notes?
Yes.
Alright. Is everybody ready? Are you sure? Are you awake? If you're not awake, then now's the time. Ready? Everybody up? Come on. Get that blood going. Get it going. Say I'm a champion. Say I was born a champion. Alright, give yourself a round of applause. Good job, good job.
Now I need adjustment.
I need no adjustment. Tomorrow, a little bit more here. Hi, Rosita. All right. Everybody doing all right? Making last minute adjustments. Come on in, guys.
Morning. Good evening. Good evening.
Come on in, guys. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
You all ready to get started?
Yep.
Okay. So what do you want to talk about tonight? Brain fog. I just remembered. A little bit of brain fog. Tomorrow, maybe just down just a little bit. All right, so tonight we have True Cellular Detox. How many of you guys have done a detox program before, or you're kind of familiar with how detox works in some way, shape, or form? Most of us know, but whether you have or you haven't, tonight we're going to take a deep dive into really how to get, all this stuff out, all the junk out, how to get healthier, think more clearly, really just have your healthiest year ever. Who's ready for that? Say aye.
Aye.
Woohoo! Good. There's just a quick reminder, next month we have Heart Smart Nutrition. How many of you guys have been to, is this your first workshop? How many of you guys, this is your first workshop? Raise your hand. All right. Round of applause, round of applause. Keep your hands up if you've been to 3 or more workshops, 5 or more workshops, 10 or more workshops, 20 or more workshops, 100. Carlos, I'm going to have you come on up here. Come on up front. Come on up front. We're going to make room for you. Here, come on over here. Got a seat here, got a seat here. Front and center. Come on over here. Yeah, right over here.
He will never be late.
You won't ever be late.
Oh,
No?
thank you.
This is the shower section. You sit in the front row, just bring soap with your showers. Okay, so I want to congratulate you guys for being committed to continuing to come to the workshops. Keep learning, keep growing. Everybody here knows that if you've been to a workshop before, when you come back, you always learn something more. And you always want to keep learning. You want to learn because there's something called constant and never-ending improvement. And that's what all of you have in common. That's what winners, that's what champions have in common. So turn to the right, person on your right, give them a tap on the shoulder and say, I'm proud of you. Good, good, good. As we always say, when you stop learning, you stop growing. And when you stop growing, you start. Bingo. Yes. How many of you guys remember Steve Jobs? Yeah. At the time of his death, he talked about all the things that he did and all the regrets that he had. And you guys know the story of what he wished he did more of. His net worth, but when he died, was, anybody have any ideas? You know how much he was worth when he died? $7 billion. That's with a B. Billion. Yeah. Very wealthy guy. But he gained a lot of wealth, but in the end, he had no health. Lost his health. Would anybody here want to trade places with Steve Jobs? Of course not. So, safe to say, there's nothing more important in your health. Your health is the most precious commodity that you have, because when you lose your health, everything else goes along with it. And so tonight's really important because it really digs down to almost every aspect of where health and healing comes from. And how many of you have been to a workshop before or a class like this and you learned some life-changing information and then you had an opportunity to implement it, but you did not implement it? How many of you guys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of us are, we've experienced that. Procrastination, or for some reason you just don't take action and you have the information but no application. You know what I'm talking about, right? So tonight, my wish and my prayer is that tonight's going to be different. I'm going to give you information, and I'm going to give you life-changing information. It has the ability to change and transform your life, for you to sleep better, have more energy, be more encouraged, have a greater level of activity, literally not just now, but for the years to come.
Thank you.
And so, by the end of tonight, I'm going to give you an opportunity to make a different choice and actually take action. And so, I'll circle back to that. But what we're going to cover tonight really is going to be eye-opening. So I want to start with this question. Do you believe the world needs changing? Lord knows. Yeah, now more than ever. Someone once said, be the change you want to see.
Right.
So the greatest thing that we can do is actually apply what we're going to talk about tonight in our own lives and take action and lead by example. And that's really what I'm aiming for right now, so that you can get everything that I'm talking about. But look at really where we're at right now with the state of health in our families. If the present scale of autism continues the way it is, the number of cases rising, in 10 years, 1 out of 2 kids in the United States will be on the autism spectrum. Progressively worsening exponentially. 1 out of 3 kids born after the year 2000 are diabetic. There are more cases of diabetes being diagnosed now every year. Children more than adults. So the difference between common and normal, right? So everybody thinks being on medication for diabetes or for blood pressure or cholesterol, this and that, is normal because it's so common. Everybody's on it. But the question is, what's the difference between common and normal? When you leave the United States, you don't see the vast number of people on so many different medications like we are here in the United States. 75% of adult Americans over the age of 40 have been diagnosed with at least one chronic disease. When I went to my 30-year high school reunion 4 years ago, I was in 17, 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. I remember, talking to all my friends, and I hadn't seen them in like 25 years, right? Most of them. And what do you think the average person was on? How many different medications? At least 2. The average senior citizen is on 6, 8, sometimes upwards of 12 different medications. So it's common, but the question is it normal? Of course not. Less than a minute from now, somebody's going to be diagnosed with cancer, every 54 seconds. So we know this. Cancer is so common that, again, we just think that it's normal. But again, only in the United States, we lead the world in cancer diagnosis and treatment for cancer. And there's a lot more to it than just being a victim. So what's causing all of this? What's significantly contributing to this, the recipe for sickness and disease? Well, particularly what we're going to focus on tonight is toxicity. And there's 3 main toxins that are causing this explosion of unexplained illness. Number 1 is mercury. Number 2 is lead. Number 3 is pesticides. And we're going to break that down, and we're going to cover each one and how it actually affects you. So where does toxicity start? How do we start getting toxic? Like when we start playing with thermometers, or no, it starts in the womb. Like when you're in your earthly mother's womb, and you have an umbilical cord. Now you have a funnel that takes the toxins from your mother and starts pumping it into you. So the Environmental Working Group examined the cord blood of several 100 newborns, and they actually found that there was an average of 200 different toxins that were found per baby, and 180 of those were known to cause cancer. So these are independent studies that were done that confirm the fact that toxins are found in newborns. via the umbilical cord. So we know this. And again, the question becomes why do we have more increasing rates of cancer in children? And all you have to do is take a good look at the toxicity level of the parents, particularly the moms. So it's a generational epidemic because we're passing it on to our children, and then it changes the genetic expression. And when it changes the genetic expression in us, it affects the generation after. So the lead generation, our parents, most of us grew up in the lead generation, right? We had leaded gasoline before we had unleaded gasoline. We had leaded paint. Now we have lead-free paint. But guess what? If you live in a house that was built, prior to the 70s, early 70s, what did they paint over? Leaded paint. So, not to mention, again, your parents grew up in this environment, so if it affected them and you came from a mother who was pregnant with these toxicity levels and those toxins affected them, by default, you inherited it. It got into your system. So the other thing is that when you have this toxicity in the cells, and there's DNA in the cells that carry your predisposition or not for Alzheimer's, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and all these diseases, whether you get them or not, whether you turn those disease genes on or turn them off, very often can be caused by high levels of toxicity inside those cells. And this is really important that we understand that toxicity happens at a cellular level. A lot of people they have this general etheric observation that it's like whole body, it's systemic. Well, that's true at some level, but the most important part is what happens in each and every individual cell. They did a study at Duke University with something called this agouti gene in mice. And what they did was they spliced the genes and they edited the genes with this mRNA, something that they're using with the COVID vaccines now. Well, they pioneered this research a long time ago with mice. And what they did was they altered genetically the ability for the mice to detoxify. Part of that process is called methylation. Everybody say methylation. Methylation. Yes. So what they did was, in one group, they had the agouti gene, and this agouti gene was the gene for obesity and diabetes, right, and shortened life expectancy. So both groups had it. You can see the mice on the left, they had something called the methylated gene, which means that it was able to detoxify and shut off the gene that would express the obesity and the diabetes. Now, in the other group, they did not edit it to have the methylation or the detoxification. They disabled it. So these mice were not able to detoxify, and because of the toxins that were in the environment with both of these groups, the ones that were not able to detoxify, they could not shut off the agouti gene. So guess what happened to them? They all became obese. They all had diabetes. And guess what? They had offspring. And what do you think all the little baby mice were born with because of that gene that was activated? What do you think? They all were expressing the agouti gene. They all became obese and they all became diabetic because of the prior generation, because the DNA was affected. So what's important about this? Your environment is really what determines the way your genes express themselves, to either shut them off and prevent diabetes and obesity and cancer and Alzheimer's, or turn it on to where you start expressing it, and then you have to get treatment for that. Then we wonder why we can't control our weight. We're depressed, we have anxiety, we can't sleep, we're forgetful, our energy is in the toilet, right? Well, that's what I'm talking about tonight. How do we fix that? Is that a good question?
Yeah.
So, again, talking about lead, when it gets into you, the question is, how does it get out? Well, it doesn't. Your body stores the lead where? Where does the body store the lead? In the bones. Did you know that? Yeah. And then it gets released at certain times when there are hormonal changes as you get older. What are some of those times? When you're pregnant?
Menopause.
Right? menopause, breastfeeding, kidney disease, stress. Hello? Stress? Anybody not have stress here? Right? Thyroid problems, all these different conditions that involve body chemistry and hormonal changes, the lead starts going, releasing. And then what happens is you see your health tank on so many different levels. So this is a big part of why we feel horrible health-wise during different seasons in our life, and it's traceable back to hormonal changes.
How about osteoporosis?
Yes. And the Journal of the American Heart Association did a study in 2018, and I remember clipping this out because my father's sister, my aunt, she's on like 3 different medications for high blood pressure, has never been able to get it under control, and she lives very close to Flint, Michigan. And what do you remember about Flint, Michigan? What happened with the water supply? Toxicity, high levels of toxicity, which is an understatement. So, I saw this, and the quote was, "This is the first study to our knowledge that points to the cumulative low-level lead exposure as a potential risk factor for what? Drug-resistant hypertension." And so, in another study, it showed that women between the ages of 65 and 87 with what? High lead levels were nearly 60% more likely to die. So this is something it's ubiquitous. It's in most, if not all, of our systems, and for some of us more than others. And then we look at our health profile and how many different medications that we're on and how many, health challenges that we have, and why can't they get that under control? I always ask my patients, so you're on high blood pressure medication or you're on diabetes medication, how long do you have to take that for? I don't know, the rest of my life? Right. Now, if it cured the condition, if it corrected the cause of the problem, how long would you be on it for? You wouldn't. So that's the thing that, again, it's so common. We think that it's normal. We just go on these medications indefinitely and they don't have side effects. No. They're toxic because they're made in a laboratory. These pills that we pop, they don't grow on trees or out of the ground like a piece of fruit, right? They come from a laboratory, so they all have side effects and they're cumulative, and they never correct the cause of the problem. But I'm going to start talking about something that does. How about lead in lipsticks? 20 out of the 33 lipsticks that they put through these tests showed they had high, what? Lead content. Yeah, so how often are we putting lipstick on? It goes on your skin, transdermal. Well, we all know this, that, your skin is just it's a barrier that absorbs these things. It's permeable, it goes right in, and then the question is, how long does it stay in there, and what does it do to our health? So, how many of you guys know that ancient Roman architecture and engineering was just a marvel? You look at that stuff today, and it's just like, holy smokes, it's mind-blowing. The aqueducts and the water systems that they had, mind-blowing. But what's also mind-blowing is that they actually lined a lot of those water systems with lead. Yeah, sheets of lead. So, there's been many studies historically that link this back to potentially the beginning of the end for Roman civilization, the decline of that era, because of all the mental illness that they had, traceable back to lead. Yeah. So the thing is, it's back in ancient Rome, it's still in our water sources today. And they've done independent studies that show that, almost 2,000 water systems across the United States have higher than normal, or acceptable levels of lead. Wow. So this is a real thing. These are in our water systems, whether we like it or not. They have acceptable ranges, that they say, of allowing these toxins to safely, quote unquote, enter our body. So we have lead, and what we say the second one is mercury. So we're still talking about heavy metals, which affect your body and even more so your brain. So where does the mercury come from? Well, anybody here wear contact lenses, or did wear contact lenses, or their parents or siblings wear contact lenses? Okay, so if it was back in the 90s or before, it had the solution had thimerosal in it. It doesn't anymore, but for all those years that we did use that accumulated in our system. And then, obviously, many of us were immunized. The older you are, the fewer immunizations that you had. But the older you are, the more likely it is that you've probably had flu shots. Both of the childhood immunizations and the flu shots contain something called thimerosal. So that comes from mercury. And I've had many of my patients, parents that I've educated them on, and they're like, well, they go back to the pediatrician and say, I don't want that. I don't want that toxin in my child's body. And the pediatrician would say, well, it's not in there. It's not an active ingredient. And they say, well, would it be okay if you brought out the box so I could just double check? And they brought it out and they read it right in front of the pediatrician. And sure enough, thimerosal. Wow. And then what does the pediatrician say? Oh, geez, I didn't know. So again, you can't take anybody's word at face value, not just for the shots or for anything else. But up until like last year, all I ever did was talk about flu shots. Now nobody talks about flu shots. Nobody's getting a flu shot. There's no flu. There's just COVID. It took the place of the flu. So we won't go down that conspiracy theory road because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But I'm just pointing out the obvious. It's like nobody's talking about the flu. Nobody's getting a flu shot. Flu is almost like non-existent. The only thing that we have to focus on now is what's shoved in our face by way of the media. That's the narrative that we're getting now. But nonetheless, many of us in the room have had annual flu shots, or you have family members that have annual flu shots, and it definitely leaves its mark. The other thing is amalgam fillings. Now, for over 150 years, the dental profession has used amalgam fillings. I think now they're starting to taper back a little bit because of the public outcry. In the United States, we're like one of the only countries that I know of in the world that still allows amalgam fillings. It's banned. Mercury is banned in pretty much almost every other country, but we still use it here. And it's well known that the majority of mercury vapor that we're exposed to that gets in your kidneys, your liver, your brain, your organs comes from the mercury vapor that comes off your teeth if you have amalgam fillings. Did you know that? That's the thing that contributes the majority of mercury exposure to your body. So I want to share this with you. So if you've never seen this before, you really need to see this, because if you have amalgam fillings, you want to know what causes the mercury to leach out of that filling as it goes into your brain, or any other part of your body, because it will do this. And I want you to follow this very, very, very quickly. We'll watch this.
Is mercury vapor coming off a 25-year-old silver amalgam filling in an extracted tooth. The background is a phosphorescent screen. The mercury vapor absorbs the fluorescent light, and you can see it as a shadow on the screen. This is mercury coming off a filling that was dipped in water that's the same temperature as the human body. This is a filling that was rubbed with a pencil eraser for just a few seconds. Like going to the hygienist and having her clean your teeth. These are not small amounts of mercury. If you can see it, it's more than 1,000 times higher than the Environmental Protection Agency will allow for the air that we breathe. Wow. What about the last time you went to the dentist and they drilled on your tooth? Here is the mercury vapor every time you raise the temperature to 110 degrees with hot coffee or warm water, or even chewed on it. Mercury comes off fillings every time you stimulate them, and that stimulation causes the mercury to continue to leak out of the fillings for an hour and a half at a minimum.
It's pretty scary, isn't it? Yeah. So that's why, every other country in the world has already banned, mercury, and the United States is one of the few left. Yeah, they're protecting it for, financial interests. So classic mercury poisoning symptoms, like extreme mercury symptoms of depression, brain fog, anxiety, forgetfulness, dizziness. These are classic mercury toxicity signs. Irritability, insomnia, digestive issues. I'm going to get into why and how it disrupts all these bodily functions. Nail fungus, metallic taste in the mouth, ringing in the ears, tender teeth, cold hands and feet, when your extremities are cold all the time, sensitivity to sound, abnormal menses. So these are classic mercury toxicity signs and symptoms. So if you're having any of these, or you know somebody, again, this very well could be the causative factor. This is my heavy metal test. I did this back in when I was 40, so that was 2009. And what you'll notice is where I circled the mercury and lead. Actually, I circled the wrong one. It should be the lead and the mercury, which is slightly above that little red thing. And when you look to the right, you'll see the black lines which go into the extremely elevated areas there. So my lead, the reference range for lead was below 5. I was at 14, right? Where do you think that came from? My mom, yeah. And all the shots that I got when I was a kid. Never had a flu shot though. And then the mercury, so you see reference range less than 3, 8.3.
Wow.
So serious stuff. Now I had a lot of amalgam fillings, and I eventually had them taken out. I had them taken out before I had this test. When? Before I had this test, years before. So when they took the fillings out, did it take the toxicity out of my body? No. I'm glad I had them out, but I still had another problem to tackle. So I remember I did this thing called DMSA, and it's like a serious heavy metal dump. But what I didn't know is that it just wasn't safe. And I didn't realize what I was doing. I was working with somebody who was supposedly a specialist, and I was sick for like a couple of weeks, and I couldn't figure out why. And at the end, I just had to call it quits. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I couldn't adjust. Like I was in the office here, and I couldn't function. I mean, some of you were patients of mine back then. You know, I was adjusting 250 people a day, 300 people a day. Like, you know, imagine trying to do that with no energy. I felt like I had bricks in my shoes, so I had to pull the plug on it. And I'm going to circle back to what I've learned since then, and something else that really could have helped me then, but I had to wait 13 years to find it. So other potential dental hazards, if you didn't know this, root canals. Root canals trap bacteria in the microtubules and wreak havoc on our health with that. Gold crowns with amalgam. When you have opposing metals or different metals in your mouth, and you have saliva, that's like the acid from a battery, 2 opposing metals, that's a battery. You're creating an electrical charge. So very unhealthy, different metals, bridges with mercury, implants and other surgical things. So if you've got these things going on, again, causative factors. A lot of people don't know this. Walking around with it, and it's slowly leaching our health. Heavy metals, lead and mercury, we've been talking about this whole time, they drive brain inflammation. What do they drive? Brain inflammation. So it triggers the genes associated especially with Alzheimer's and dementia. How does it do that? Inside the cell. Inside the cell you have the DNA. And then all the cells are toxic. All the toxins are trapped inside the cells. And it starts turning on those bad genes, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. The other thing it does, the lead and the mercury, is it destroys your intestinal bacteria. It kills the good bacteria in there, and it also kills the neurotransmitters, the things like serotonin, right, and dopamine. What's serotonin for? Everybody say serotonin. Serotonin. What is serotonin? It's the happy neurotransmitter, the feel-good neurotransmitter. And if you're toxic, that's one of the main reasons why people are depressed. So this is a big deal. Again, if you have high mercury levels, high lead levels, this very well may be where it's coming from. And again, going back to the flu shot, what I said earlier is it's because of the gradual buildup of mercury and aluminum in the brain. That's another factor for Alzheimer's and dementia. If you keep getting flu shots, Dr. Hugh Fudenberg, the world's leading immunogeneticist, he has 850 peer-reviewed journals of research that he's published in. Does that make him some level of authority on the immune system? Yes or yes? Yeah. So what did he say? If you've had 5 or more consecutive flu shots, your chance of developing Alzheimer's disease is what? 10 times greater than if you had 1 or 2 or no shots. So this is it. This is important, so you understand where you've come from, and you understand, well, maybe there's a better way moving forward. Right or right? Right. Yeah. So mercury is a cause for dementia in earlier stages in life. People in their 40s now more commonly getting diagnosed with dementia. I'm seeing more dementia than ever before. It's even hit my own family members. My mother-in-law, she was diagnosed with dementia in her late 60s. By 70, she had full-blown Alzheimer's, and now she's in a memory care center. And it's not good. And you know, when I tell people the story, I see the heads nodding. They're like, "Yeah, me too. Yeah, my mother too." So it's so common. And when I first started practice almost 30 years ago, it wasn't. It wasn't. The statistics now is 1 out of 9 people over the age of 65 are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and 1 out of 2 over the age of 85 are diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're not doing something now to stop that, what do you think your chances are of developing and being diagnosed with it? Yeah, and I'm not speaking this over you. I'm not trying to instill fear in you. I'm just saying read into the stats right now, because it's a fortune teller for the future. That's the trend, and if we don't do something different, how could we expect to get something different? Right? Does that make sense? So this is a pretty cool clip too. I want to show just a minute of this.
But they still have thimerosal in.
Yes, they still also have multi-dose vials that do contain.
Why don't they go to single-dose vials?
I know that they are considering the feasibility of.
Why don't you tell them to do that?
We consider these vaccines, which also contain thimerosal as a preservative, to be safe and effective. However, we do consider that it's important to have vaccines.
Did you hear any of the testimony earlier from those people that were testifying, those scientists and doctors?
Yes, I did.
Did you see the study from Canada there that showed the damage that's done when a very minute amount of mercury is put in proximity to brain cells?
I think it's hard to extrapolate that data to what actually happens in the clinical situation.
Well, you know, every study that's been done, doctor, that you guys have put forth as showing that there's no correlation between thimerosal and autism doesn't say categorically that thimerosal doesn't cause autism. They never say that. Can you tell me right now, categorically, without any doubt whatsoever, that mercury in vaccines does not cause autism?
I think what I'd have to say is what the Institute of Medicine concluded is that the body of evidence neither allows
No, I want you to give me a yes or no. Can you say right now, just flat out, just say, can you tell me without any doubt whatsoever that the mercury in vaccines does not cause neurological problems or autism?
We can neither accept nor reject a causal relationship.
So what you're saying is you cannot tell me that. You cannot say categorically, can
We
you?
don't know one way or the other. But
So why are you keeping something in there if you don't know one way or the other? When you know that there's an epidemic of autism. If there's an epidemic of something, why do you keep it in there when you're not sure? Because every study I've seen flatly says you're not sure. You say you can't say yay or nay.
I think you have to consider the benefit that vaccines confer, and there's a definite benefit from influenza vaccine. And having an adequate supply of vaccine is very important.
Okay, well let me follow up on that then. Single shot vials, does that need thimerosal?
No, they don't, but there
Well,
are
then why don't we have single shot
There are a
vials?
lot of manufacturing issues associated with switching over. You need much more filling capacity for the lines. You need a lot more other kinds of things that need to be introduced. So although it can be done, and both Evans and Aventis Pasteur have started to introduce that, it is not something that at present they have the capacity to do in entirety.
Let me ask you this. Do these pharmaceutical companies that produce these vaccines have had in the past the ability to produce, and have they produced single shot vials?
Yes, they do, because that's how Evans and Aventis Pasteur is doing it right
Well,
now.
how about all of the pharmaceutical companies? Do all the pharmaceutical companies pretty much have the ability to produce single shot vials?
You know, I couldn't speak to that categorically. I don't know, but I do know certainly in the case of Aventis Pasteur and Evans that they do have that ability because they are doing
Okay,
that.
then why hasn't the FDA, to be on the safe side, knowing that we're having 1 in over 250 and in some cases 1 in 150 children becoming autistic, and there's a growing body of evidence that thimerosal and mercury is causing that, why wouldn't you go down the cautious road instead of coming up with these additional studies that say, well, we're not sure, we can't say yay or nay? Why not go to single shot vials?
So the story continues. You know, they keep sweeping it under the rugs, and you know, honestly, I've known this for a long time, and that's why none of my kids were ever immunized. And you know, parents ask me all the time, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? I don't tell you what to do. I don't tell anybody what to do. I just say, here's the evidence. You make the decision. It's called informed consent. That's why we live in this country. You know, we have something called freedom, which if we don't exercise those rights, it erodes and it will soon be gone. So we should have freedom of choice when it comes to our healthcare decisions, and especially your kids, because sometimes it's Russian roulette, and the vaccines are what pull the trigger. So I just wanted to introduce that to you so you understand this is what goes into us as newborns. All of us, our parents didn't know any different, so we got it. It's inside of us, and again, it's part of those little things that fill up our bucket before it overflows into something called symptoms. So the last thing that I wanted to cover is glyphosate. So we said there's lead, mercury, and what's the third one? Glyphosate. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. Everybody say glyphosate. Glyphosate. It's the active ingredient in what? Roundup. How many of you guys have ever used Roundup in your yard? Yeah? Does it concern you when you use it?
Yeah.
You kind of know that, hey, handle with care, it's a biohazard. We all kind of know that, right? What if I told you that every time you have a chip at, Carlos and Pepe's, or, you're scooping your chips and dip, a lot of these foods that we're eating, mostly in our food chain, any meat, any chicken, if you're not getting, to the label and you see that it's non-GMO, that there's no hormones, that, it's all in your system. And the reason why is because glyphosate has Monsanto has literally, by exponentially increased the amount of glyphosate on almost every crop. The two in particular that they've had the most application is corn and soy. Corn and soy, right? So if you look at this on the right-hand side, Dr. Stephanie Senna, the lead professor at MIT, she did a study and she was explaining this scale right here, which you could see the yellow boxes as they rise show the number of deaths from senile dementia. We got that? Everybody say dementia. Dementia. It's the number of deaths from senile dementia increasing over the course of about 30 years. You see 25 years. Now what's correlating that with that is the application of what? Glyphosate. Started at basically 3,500 tons in the mid-'80s, and it escalated to 35,000 tons. During that period of time, what also increased? The number of deaths from what? Senile dementia. Why is that? Because this ingredient affects your brain. It has the ability to open what's called the blood-brain barrier. And when it goes into your brain, bad things happen. So, here's an example of a study that was done when they put a little bit of what's called GM maize. It's from the corn. It's genetically modified, and they put it in the water supply of these rats. And just the smallest amounts, you could see that they develop mammary tumors. What are mammary glands? Breast cancer, breast tumors with severe kidney and liver damage as early as 4 months in males and even 7 months for females. So this is what it looks like when you put that stuff in a small body. But when you put it in a big body like you and I, it just takes what? It takes a little bit longer. Now, so we have to look, and you understand that it's in our food supply. Okay, so if you start with this down here where it says cows fed GMO, corn and soy, what's GMO? Is anybody what? Genetically modified organism. Why do they call it genetically modified? So they genetically modify the crops to be able to withstand the onslaught and the concentration of that herbicide, of that weed killer, to have as much poison in those crops to withstand that. And those crops, basically, who's eating them? The cows, the chickens, the fish. And who's eating that?
Us.
We are, yeah. So, unless you're buying non-GMO, that's why this is so important. And when you go to the store, you'll be like, well, it's so much more expensive. How much is your health worth? Honestly, you're either going to spend it on drugs treating the disease, or you're going to spend it on good lifestyle preventing it. Either way, we all pay. Either way, we all pay. Right or right? Right. Yeah, so this is common sense. GMO soy protein filler. in the burgers that you eat. You know, if you go through drive-thrus or any of the burgers that you buy, even in Publix, if it's non-GMO, you have to look for soy filler. The wheat is desiccated with Roundup. High fructose GMO corn syrup. What does that mean? What is corn syrup? Not only is it sugar on steroids, it's sugar on steroids with glyphosate. Sprite, 7-Up, Coke, you know, all of these soft drinks that we know is not the best thing for us, but we just turn our back and let our kids go to town on that. And every day, can you imagine? Holy smokes, how bad is this for us? GMO canola oil, potatoes desiccated with herbicide. So, you know, this is what we call SAD. Everybody say SAD. SAD. Which is an acronym for the Standard American Diet. Good job. She's with me. How many of you guys are with me right now? Say aye. Aye. Good. All right. Now, how about that? Soy formula? Ooh. Do they make non-GMO soy formula? I haven't seen it. So again, where's this starting? Early days, early life, childhood, infants. So you you've seen a timeline of your life flash before your eyes, right? From the womb and now to your age, decades later, some of us in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and we have toxins that have gone into our body and are building up, kind of like water that fills up a bucket. And you know, before the bucket overflows, there's not a problem. That's why, as many of us are very, very toxic, highly toxic, your bucket may not have overflowed yet. Maybe you don't have symptoms. But if we have more toxins going in than our body can get out, what happens? Yeah, eventually we start having these symptoms. And these are the classic symptoms of toxicity. High blood pressure or low blood pressure. When your bucket starts overflowing from all these toxins, digestive issues, hard to lose weight, dizziness, inability to handle stress, fatigue, brain fog, headaches, hormone dysregulation, as I said before, insomnia, depression, muscle and joint pain. Is this starting to sound familiar? Yes. And so this is a reality, but again, it's a huge layer that we've never really peeled back. And I want to go through this with you so that you understand. How do you know how toxic you are? Well, the two most important tests that we use to determine, number one, it's how toxic you are, and number two, how you're progressing away from it. I'm not going to ask, I don't ask the question, are you toxic? Because everybody knows the answer to that by now, right? We're all toxic. The real question is what? How toxic are you? So there's a couple of tests that we use. One of them is Deborah. I don't know if Deborah has the card. Some of you guys have done this. Do you have the card that goes on here? Okay. So basically, this is called a visual contrast sensitivity test. And you put it on your chin, and there's a card that sits here. And it's not measuring how, if you're 20/20 or 20/30 or 20/40. What it's measuring is your optic nerve's ability to discern fine lines, like visual lines. And this is pretty cool, thank you. So, I don't know that you guys can actually see this, but there are pretty cool lines that are going up and down and sideways and stuff. And it'll tell us not only how toxic you are, it'll tell us what type of toxicity you have, like if it's mold, heavy metal, different things. So basically, this goes here, and we start with one card, and you go through and you tell her which way the lines are going, and it gives you a score, and it tells you your level of toxicity, and also tells you the predominance in terms of what type of toxicity needs to be addressed. So that's one way. And then the other test that we use is something called a meta-oxy test. Now, this is 50 times more accurate than a blood test to show inflammation, cellular inflammation. So this is the most accurate way to determine how inflamed those cells are from the toxicity level. So this is very important because we not only do this in the beginning to determine your level of toxicity, but as we progress through a detoxification program, at the end of every phase, we retest so that we we want to hear that you're feeling better, but we also want to see the objective evidence of these tests coming down. You see the levels of red there? Super red, highly toxic. You know, maybe a month from now, you go through part of the program, it starts to get less and less and less and less. And this is how you know that those toxins are coming out and this is actually working. I'll tell you what, if this test costs $1,000, it would be worth it. You know why? Because it shows cause. They could say your body's inflamed, or you have systemic inflammation, or you have inflammation in your shoulder, your leg, or your hip, or this or that, but they never tell you the cause. So if we can determine the level of cellular inflammation, and then we can see it progressively improving, that makes this super valuable, very highly valuable.
How do you collect that?
Yeah, it's a urine test. Basically, yeah, we give you the kit, you go into the restroom, and then you use that little pipette to pull the urine out, and then you put it into the little bottle, and the little bottle has a reagent in there that it reacts with, and your urine reacts with that reagent, and it produces the color, which tells you how much inflammation that you have. Pretty neat, huh? So, you know, that's why it's important that we get down to the cellular level. It's all about the inflammation around the cell. Now, you can do all these things. It's like I said in the video a couple of days ago, it's estimated that 98% of heavy metal detox, number one, is not effective, and number two, is not safe. And I know this for a fact because, again, I've done so many of these, and they were very painful experiences. But what I'm going to share with you in a minute is one that was very successful, not painful, and it's very encouraging. Chlorella, herbal, citrus pectin, they're not true binders. Like, you can pull the toxins out of your system, but you know what? If you don't have something that actually pulls it out of your colon and into the toilet, guess where it goes? Right back into your system. Yep.
What about the charcoal? I heard that this one bind to it and take it out.
Yes, and it has to have the right constituents in it. So I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Yep. And then glutathione is important, but it won't do anything for heavy metals. Zeolites, DMSA, that's what I took, the DMSA. And boy, oh boy, that was not fun. So these are things like, you know, the 10-day cleanses, all these different programs that you see people touting and talking about, and so-called experts, you know, saying, do this, it works, it's good. But at the end of the game, if it doesn't fix the cell, you don't really get well. And fixing the cell is like taking the bucket and emptying it out. Get rid of the water in there. Get rid of all the toxins. Empty the cell out. Get the cells to detoxify. Does that make sense? So I want to break this down for you. And again, I want to break it down to you so that you understand what has to be done. So this is a cell. Can everybody see the cell right there? All right. So right here we have the wall of the cell membrane, which is made up of what? Fat. Very good. Fat. Everybody say that word. Fat. All right. So guess what toxins have an affinity for? Guess what toxins seek in the body? Fat. You guys are so smart. This is going faster than better than I thought. So the toxins come in, like all the toxins that we just talked about, and then some, right? They're all coming in all the time. And what happens? They all get embedded into the surface of the cell, right? And they camp out there, and what does it cause? Inflammation. What does it cause? Inflammation. The toxins cause inflammation at the cellular level. Now, why is this important? Because this membrane is permeable, and that's supposed to be letting all the good stuff in, like the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidants, all these things in, and then the toxins, the mitochondria, where the energy comes from, also makes energy and excretes waste, and that and the toxins have to get out. So that cell membrane, you know, it has to be permeable, it has to function. Here's something else. Hormones, like insulin, there are insulin receptors on the surface of the cell. How do you expect, you know, insulin receptors to get the glucose into the cell? Then you have a hormonal problem with your blood sugar, and then you have, you know, thyroid, and then you have estrogen, and then you have testosterone. You have all these hormones which rely on the communication through the cell membrane. And what happens when toxins disrupt and shut that cell membrane down? What goes with it? All the other functions. So can everybody see how it affects your energy, how it affects your quality of life? So toxins do this by affecting the surface of the cell. Now here's going into the cell, because now this stuff can't get in. It's like, you know, if I was standing there, if your kids are yelling at you or somebody's yelling, all you have to do is plug your ears, right? And then you can yell till the cows come home. None of that's going to matter. Well, that's what's happening here. We're blunting and blocking the communication of all these important cellular functions. But then you have something else that's affected, and that's called DNA. Remember how we said when you have toxins all in here, how it turns on the bad genes, right? For dementia, for Alzheimer's, for diabetes, for high blood pressure. How does it do that? Well, you're looking at it right there, because you also have that mitochondria right in here. That mitochondria, that's the powerhouse of the cell. That's what's making the energy. Just like when you put a log in your fireplace, what does the log, when it burns, give off? Smoke. And where is that smoke? How is it supposed to escape from your house? Through what? A chimney. But if the chimney is blocked off, if the flue is shut, where does that smoke go? Inside the house. That's why more people die from smoke than from fire. So that's what's happening here. It's giving off all this waste and the byproducts from the metabolism. Plus you have these toxins that are in here and they can't get out. And that's how it turns on the bad genes. Can everybody see that? Am I getting too technical for you? No. Well, what's the most important thing to fix on this to clean all this up? It's the what? The surface of the cell, the inflammation. So we have to reduce the inflammation. We have to get the toxins out. We have to turn on something called methylation, which is how the cells get the toxins out of the cell. And you have to restore normal cellular function. So there's a whole process that needs to be addressed. But it first starts with the inflammation. Does everybody understand why this test is so important? Because that's where getting the cell get well starts. It all starts with that. So basically, in a nutshell, in order for this to be successfully corrected, there has to be a 3-step process. Now, you have to start with a preparatory phase. In other words, you have to prepare all the downstream components of your detoxification system, your liver, your kidneys, the lymphatic glands, the gut. All of that has to be supported so that it's healthy, so that it can do its job, nutritionally speaking. And then after that's done, so that's what we call the prep phase. So you're actually preparing your body to detox. You're preparing your body to do what it needs to do to regain cellular function and start the process of moving all that junk out of the cell. Are you with me right now? Okay, so let me just finish and then I'll open for questions. Okay, so the second part of that is once you've prepared the body and you go through that process of restoring the function in the cell, the methylation, starting to move some of the toxins out, restoring the cellular membrane and all that, then you get retested. Then we do another meta-oxy test, another visual acuity test, and just from that first stage of preparing the body for detox, we start seeing changes. Then you go into the second phase, which is the body phase. Now we're setting up a pressure gradient, a concentration gradient inside the cells to move the toxins out of the cell from an area of higher concentration to lesser concentration. And from there, it starts to move into your system, and that's where we use the activated charcoal to pull it out of the colon. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then you get retested after that phase, and you see your levels of toxicity dropping on the meta-oxy and the visual contrast sensitivity test. And then the final phase is the brain phase. The what?
Brain.
Okay, this is where the magic happens. This is where you start having energy that you haven't seen since you were a teenager. This is where you can throw your alarm clock out the window, because whatever time you set that alarm for, you're getting up 30 to 45 minutes earlier. You don't need to sleep as much. You sleep more soundly. Your body rests more because it's healing, because now the cells are starting to regain function properly, not just in your body, but in your brain also. And for the first time in decades, you have the lowest toxicity levels and the greatest range of cellular function that you've had in as long as you can remember. And then, of course, after the brain phase, we retest one more time. So this is a 90-day program. This is the true cellular detox program. And if you've never taken the time to do it at this level, as comprehensive as I'm talking about, you really owe it to yourself to look into this. I've done it 3 different times. I usually do it at least once annually. Based on my DNA test in particular, and there's some people in the room, you may or may not know this, but by way of a DNA test, you can tell whether or not your body is missing the genes or has gene inactivity when it comes to detoxification. I'm one of those people. So for me, anytime I do a detox program, it's like night and day. When I get done with a detox program, it's like the lights are on. Yeah, it's like the lights are on. Oh, somebody just turned the lights on. Really? Yeah, the lights are on. It's like night and day. And for most of the people who go through this program, there is a significant difference in your energy, the way you sleep, your quality of life. So many different things change on so many different levels. But this is a very comprehensive program. It's not a 10-day cleanse. It's not a fast. It's unlike anything that you've ever done before. These boxes come with pre-packaged supplements. And the ingredients in there are world-class. I'd been in practice for 25 years before I saw this. I'd never seen anything like that. So it's very well thought out and meticulously assimilated in a fashion so that it happens methodically to be most effective to eliminate toxins and get down to the deepest levels in your body. So these are all prepackaged supplements. You take some of them in the morning, midday, night. There's a different type of liquid that helps with mobilizing. So it's a whole different level. Now, I say all that to say this, that there's something that also I have taken through some of my patients, and most recently my wife, Yvette. And she's had hormonal issues and other issues that we found out with different testing, and we've been addressing them. But one of the components of addressing her hormonal imbalances was the level of toxicity. And so we've had her on this thing called the Detox Packs. They have it for men and women, and it's different than the comprehensive level of program that I've been talking to you about, True Cellular Detox. Now, if you're an individual that has already done the True Cellular Detox and you're looking for something less comprehensive, something to really just get back to, mobilizing toxins and something less complicated, maybe for whatever reasons it wasn't the right time for you, or you were concerned about the number of supplements that you had to take, or the length of time that you had to do the program for. 90 days just didn't work for you. So if you've done this program before, or you had any other issues, then I would say that is a good recommendation for you. Because Yvette's been doing this detox program now for a month, and she, in the morning, here's how I know it's working. You know how I know it's working? Here's how. Because in the mornings, we sit together, we read our Bible, and then we pray. Now, when she wasn't feeling so well, guess who'd be there by themselves? Yeah. She'd sleep in. I mean, if I was lucky to see her one day out of the week next to me, with me at that time, it was a lot. The last month, she's up 45 minutes before me. She's sitting in her chair, she's waiting for me. And I can't tell you the last time I remember her being so happy, being so healthy, being so energetic, being so consistent with her level of mental clarity. And so it's really meant a lot to me. So that's why I'm offering this to you, because I've seen the change in my own family, my wife. So I'm just going to tell you flat out, if you've never done the detox program before, I am going to recommend that you do that main one over there, because I've done that if you've never done it before. But, I'm going to circle back for just a second. So I just wanted to cover this. There's 2 different options, but that second option isn't necessarily for everybody. It's really more for the folks who have already done this and they're wanting to do more. I would say continue with this.
Did your wife do the one on the left?
So This one over here?
She did that
Yeah.
on the right?
She did the one on the right, yeah.
But did she
So-
do the left one before?
She never did that one.
Oh.
No. But actually, I take that back. She did. She did. She just couldn't get through it. She never completed it. Yeah.
Why?
And
There
why?
is a reason.
It's for some people. It's just you know, for some people who are regimented, they can do it. It's not a problem. And for other people, it's a higher level of complexity. And I recognize that. You know, everybody's a little bit different. So again, that's another reason why I have that up there, so that you understand that something is better than nothing. Would everybody agree?
Yeah, it's too much when it's too much.
No, it's not. It's not too much that because it feels that it's you know, it's a lot to. So I don't want to give you the impression that it's too much. That's not what I'm saying. Whatever you need to do, if that stuff is baked in your brain and your cells, you should do it. You got to do what you need to do, you know. But for some of you guys, you've already done this, you know, and you're here again. You've been to this program. You've been to several times. So I'm giving you another option. Not trying to create confusion, but how do you know which one really? Here's how you know is by doing the testing. That's how you know. So I just want to finish up with this last thing here.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide.
I love that video because it basically shows you the future, you know. Think about where you were 10 years ago, how you were feeling, what you were doing. Think about where you're at now, how you're living, how you're feeling. But really more importantly, think about a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, because the decisions you make now are going to determine what happens between now and then. So really the real question is, what do you have to do between now and then to make sure you have your healthiest future ever? You know, the choice is yours. It's up to you to decide. Your health it just comes down to a series of choices. And in the beginning, remember I told you that I'm gonna give you an opportunity to do something different this time, to make a decision that's good for your health, that you can actually follow through with and apply. It's one thing to get information, but information without application is hallucination. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking that anything's going to change unless you take action. You know, so I'd hate to see anybody walk out of here with just nodding their head and saying that was a great presentation. No, you should take action, because the last thing that we want is regret. Like, we could have had this improvement. We could have had this improved in this area, this, and this, all these different areas, which I've seen and I know. But again, you have to make that choice. So what does it come down to? It's you start with the tests, you know, and see and understand your level of toxicity, and then determine if the program is a good fit for you or not. That's what we have to see. We have to see if you're a candidate for the program. For some of you, maybe it is too much. I don't know. But for those of you, there are some of you in here where you're going to see your toxicity levels, and you're going to know your health, and you're going to know what you really need to do. And after you get the testing done, then you decide what you're going to do. But start with the tests. Start with the tests. That's the most important thing. Now, once you get the testing done, you have questions, you know, how the program works, what's in it, how often you have to take it, this and that. Deborah will go over all that with each of you with any questions that you have. But I'm going to finish with telling you this. Start with the test. So you have a questionnaire in your handout. You can fill that out at home and bring it back to your appointments. That's part of what we look at to determine your level of toxicity. And then the visual contrast sensitivity test and the meta-oxy test. You know, if you did these tests, let's say you went to your doctor's office in the hospital. If you did this test, all this testing like this, what do you think they charge you for that? What do you think?
They have
600?
They have it in the hospital?
No, but I'm just saying if they did.
They don't
What do you
have
think they charge?
Couple thousand.
Couple $1,000, couple hundred, couple $1,000, and it would still be worth it. So normally the testing is $300, but we're giving it to you tonight for only $97, so that each of you could find out how to, you know, this all applies to you, and then what to do from there. All right, so
those two tests?
those two tests, yep, and the questionnaire. So it's 3 things that we review. So obviously, Deborah's schedule is limited, so there's a limited number of appointments. So I'm going to say if you want to make that appointment, make sure you see her tomorrow. Would you be able to book some of those appointments also? Help Deborah out? I'm not sure if you guys can help her out and just save everybody some time. But if you want to make those appointments, please see them before you leave, because that special is good for tonight only. And I'm going to let everybody else go. If you have questions, individual questions, you can come up and see me after. Thank you so much for being here tonight, guys. I love and appreciate you. God bless.
Thank you.